Last week's surge of migrants arriving in Ceuta has shaken European politics. But what actually happened? Well, we know the story from the far right.
I'm here in Ceuta, the Spanish territory that was just stormed by 50,000 Moroccan men in that extraordinary footage. Now, we also saw some of those men maraud through town overnight. We saw them loot shops, we saw them terrorize locals. We heard from a man who said he's wanted for murder in his home country. But here's the thing, when you see 50,000 arrive in a single day, what happens? Spain sends its armed forces in response. 200,000 have turned up on British beaches illegally under Tory and Labour.
So that was Reform's Zia Youssef, whose attempt at hard-hitting investigative reporting live from Ceuta included a bunch of unverified footage. I think some of it from riots that took place a couple of years ago. Claims about looting which haven't been reported anywhere else. So slop, really. And the fact that migrants, or the Moroccans had all been sent back to Morocco by the time Zia Youssef got there, somewhat undermined this comment from another leading reform politician. So Suella Braverman, on the day the barriers were first breached, tweeted a video with the caption, "Make no mistake, these men are on their way to the UK right now." The men in that video will almost certainly not be on their way to the UK. Over 48,000 of the roughly 50,000 people who entered the exclave have now been returned. So this was in reality an immigration crisis, or so-called immigration crisis, that had no material effect on any country in mainland Europe, let alone the UK. But the scenes from Ceuta were undeniably striking. And actually, we can call them a crisis because they left at least 72 Moroccans dead. Their aftermath has come with speculation as to what exactly this was all about, what was going on. Some, of course, have looked to geopolitics. For example, could this have been a crisis engineered by Morocco in protest at a recent official Spanish visit to their rival neighbour, Algeria? Well, comments from a Moroccan man speaking to the New York Times could support that theory. So 24-year-old Ajoub El Arot told the New York Times this: "I don't know why they let us through. Maybe they had some political reason. They opened the border and let everyone go by. When there are political problems, Morocco opens the door and tells us to go." Spain, which never misses an opportunity to lecture Israel, has declared a state of emergency in Ceuta following the crisis over its immigration policy. Maybe before it continues lecturing us, it's time it explained to the world why it still maintains colonial enclaves in Africa. To be honest, there is a genuine question, why do they have enclaves in Africa? But we'll assume, I'm not going to give Danny Danon credit for that fairly obvious point. Many European leaders have also suggested that Spain brought this on themselves. So Italy and Denmark put forward a letter to the EU that was signed by 22 out of 27 member states. Here's an extract. They said, "We are writing to express our serious concern regarding the recent developments at the external border of the European Union in Ceuta. We are determined to prevent smugglers from challenging the integrity of the Union's external borders. We recognise that the recent ruling of the Spanish Supreme Court has been used to trigger this attack and abuse our migration and asylum system. At the same time, we have a duty to effectively deter and relentlessly combat illegal migration by coordinating our action, strengthening our external borders, and addressing all policies that can serve as pull factors, such as the regularisation of very large numbers of irregular migrants." So what they're referring to there is a Spanish Supreme Court ruling in June that said authorities in Ceuta could not immediately deport people who arrive by sea without due process. So they're suggesting that sort of encouraged lots of people to cross over. They're also sort of alluding to Spain's recent amnesty for undocumented migrants. They suggest that could have been a pull factor for people trying to get into Spain. That's a narrative that Pedro Sanchez has pushed back against in a letter to European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. He said that Spain, in fact, has one of the least porous of Europe's external borders, and he complained about a lack of solidarity from some European peers. So he said this: "Most have shown us their support and solidarity and have offered their assistance. Others, however, have chosen to attack Spain and to call for its temporary exclusion from the Schengen area. In the current international context, the European Union cannot afford this kind of selfish, polarising and unlawful reaction." Barry, been lots of sort of long reads about this over the weekend. And the NYT had an interesting one, the FT had an interesting one, sort of saying, why did this happen and why now? Obviously, something happened because 50,000 people came on the same day. So there must have been something that motivated them to do that. What's your best read on what went on late last week?
Well, it's clearly not as simple as the likes of Reform and the right across the continent are making out. It wasn't, look, 60,000 people didn't all just get together on the same day and decide to, quote unquote, invade Europe. You know, also 60,000 people didn't manage to get out of Morocco without the Moroccan authorities turning some kind of a blind eye. I think that there is very convincing reporting that they at least let it happen, that they at least didn't stop it happening. Whether they orchestrated it, I mean, that's another question, but they certainly allowed it to happen. And Morocco has a long history of this. You know, this is not new. We know this. We know that Morocco has used its own people and its border with Ceuta to put diplomatic pressure, not only on Spain, but on other European countries in the past. A lot of it comes down to Western Sahara. I do think it's worth talking about Western Sahara briefly, especially because of the accusations that Israel somehow pulled the strings. I don't think Israel pulled the strings at all. But Israel is not a part of this story in a way. Because the last time that a huge number of people tried to get into Ceuta from Morocco was, I think, 2008, when Spain had a visit from the leader of the Polisario Front, right? So the Novara audience are very clever and will probably know this, but I'll just in case.
I don't know what the Polisario Front is, so unless they're a lot smarter
I'll
than
try
me, which they probably are.
I'll try to do it very quickly. Western Sahara, which borders Morocco, is, I believe, the last true colony on the face of the planet. There are other countries, right? I think there are 17. The UN has this thing called like a non-self-governing territories list. And they believe that sort of the process of decolonization in the world has not been completed until these 17 non-self-governing territories become self-governing. But most of them have some measure of autonomy. Western Sahara has no measure of autonomy, no control over its own affairs, is not recognized in any way, shape, or form as a nation state or a people, and they have never had the right to self-determination. So essentially, it was a territory called Spanish Sahara. It was Spanish colonial territory that they withdrew from in 1976. When they withdrew in 1976, Morocco and Mauritania started to fight over it. Finally, Mauritania gave up, and Morocco annexed it, and nearly the vast majority of the people, who are called the Sahrawi people, fled into Algeria. So now you have more Western Saharan Sahrawi people living in refugee camps in Algeria than live in the territory itself. And that's been the case for decades. The Polisario Front is the rebel group. It's the rebel group in Western Sahara that wants to set up a state. Now, the leader of the Polisario Front, I believe, visited Spain in 2008. And then shortly afterwards, 8,000 Moroccans stormed the Ceuta. Right? So this is an established thing that has happened before. I think what's really interesting background is that in the last year, I wrote about this in my newsletter, Proximities. In the last year, Morocco has been making big moves, finally, in terms of consolidating its control over Western Sahara. And where Israel does come into the story is that what Morocco has been trying to do is to have people recognize a plan that it has for Western Sahara. The plan is to give the people in Western Sahara, Polisario, officials in Western Sahara, some small measure of autonomy. So they will have control over sort of like some local affairs, judiciary, stuff like that. Whereas Morocco will still control, a budget, foreign policy, yada, yada.
Resources, maybe.
Yeah, well, exactly. And there are resources. Now, most countries in the world have not recognized Morocco's claim. But in the last few years, more and more and more have started to recognize it. And some of that has come at the behest of Donald Trump. Because in 2020, Trump recognized Morocco's claim, thought it was the best plan, said it was the best plan for the region. In exchange for what? In exchange for Morocco signing up to the Abraham Accords. So in exchange for Morocco normalizing relations with Israel. And so Morocco has realized that it's realized that it's moving in the right direction when it comes to Western Sahara. I think at some point, at a height, about 83 countries recognized what's called the potential state in Western Sahara is called SADR. 83 countries recognized that actually the Polisario Front as the government of Western Sahara. It's less than 50 now. They're dropping like flies, and a lot of them are dropping off because of pressure from the US. So I don't see it as Israel applying pressure to Morocco. I see it as Morocco playing a super smart game, playing Trump, playing the Israelis, playing the Europeans. And so when I look at this and I look at the reporting again, you know, I'm trying to look at what good news agencies are reporting, good analysts are saying. It looks very much like this might have been pressure on Spain around Western Sahara.
I mean, it is. And so if it was concocted by the Moroccan government, it did leave 72 of their citizens dead. So
Which is the big point here, isn't it? That like the Moroccans essentially sacrificed 72 young people to prove a point. And it's not the first time they've done it. And that route is one of the most dangerous routes in the world, migration routes. Loads of people drown trying to get around that route. You know, there's people who go every year. You know, it's not like 8,000 people or 60,000 people, but there is a constant sort of flow of people trying to get to Ceuta, not only from Morocco. A lot of them come from sub-Saharan Africa. You know, a lot of them are trafficked up there as well. You know, so yeah, the Moroccan government knows quite well how treacherous that is. And if it did sort of say, you know, then that is, I mean, it's just unforgivable, isn't it? To sacrifice your own young people to prove a diplomatic point.
Yeah, I'm also not sure what point it proved, because, I mean, I suppose, is it a warning shot to Spain, basically?
Yeah, saying we can do this anytime we want.
Anytime. That makes sense.